And now for the highlight. A native of the Texas Panhandle and a Harvard graduate, Lou Dobbs was a founding member of the CNN network in 1980 and also a founder of CNN's financial news division. Today, he is anchor and managing editor of one of CNN's top shows, Lou Dobbs. Is it Lou Dobbs Tonight? Lou Dobbs Tonight, of course. Additionally, Dobbs anchors a nationally syndicated financial news radio report. He writes a monthly column for Money Magazine, a weekly syndicated column for the Sunday issue of the New York Daily News, and is a contributing editor for U.S. News and World Report. He also manages and edits his own financial newsletter, the Lou Dobbs Money Letter, and he writes books and makes me feel really, really lazy. Mr. Dobbs has won nearly every major award for television journalism. He received the George Foster Peabody Award for his coverage of the 1987 stock market crash. In 1990, he was given the Luminary Award by the Business Journalism Review for his visionary work, which changed the landscape of business journalism in the 1980s. In 1999, he received the Horatio Alger Association Award for Distinguished Americans. Lou Dobbs' previous books include Space, The Next Business Frontier, and the more recent bestseller, War on the Middle Class, which is new in paperback, and we have copies of that as well today. He'll sign after the program. Ladies and gentlemen, here to talk about his new book, Independence Day, Awakening the American Spirit, Lou Dobbs.
Thank you, everybody. How are you? Thank you very much. Very kind of you. Doggone it. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. A quick order of business. Can you hear me back there? In the very back row? Excellent. Assuming that you want to hear me. It's nice of you to take part of your Sunday afternoon and share it with me. I appreciate it, and permitting me to offer a few thoughts about what I think is going on in the world, and to give you at least one reporter's sense of what is required for this country to fulfill what has been a 200-year promise. I chose the title Independence Day because I think it's critically important that each of us understands that now is the time for critical judgment, for critical thinking, for independent thinking, and independent action. I apologize to all of you who I'm going to offend, who are Democrats, who are Republicans, who consider yourselves conservatives, libertarians, or liberals. And now I have to include the word progressive as well, because Hillary Clinton has given up liberal and has moved on to progressive. And so I've got to keep up with the lexicon of modern politics. So I want to apologize to all of you, because unquestionably I will offend you if that's your devotion politically. I'm going to offend a few other orthodoxies over the course of the next month or so as I go around the country talking about this book and talking about politics. A lot of folks are real comfortable with the way they're thinking about our country. Just out of curiosity, I don't want to get anybody all riled up right at the start. And so rather than embarrass any of us by asking you what you are right now in terms of your political affiliation, how many of you will admit to being at one time, this may sound like the House Un-American activities, how many of you will admit to being at some point in your life affiliated with either the Republican or the Democratic parties? Oh my goodness. We have sinned together. But we do have an opportunity to set things right and to begin looking toward a future that is, if not devoid of partisanship, at least one in which partisanship is under control, and one in which we understand that there are basic values in this nation that transcend partisanship, that transcend orthodoxies, and that are critically important to the preservation of this nation, the society that is a lasting promise over 2 centuries from a document called the Constitution. I get, I don't know how many questions every day. Well, first of all, how many of you watch my broadcast? And Julie, it's Lou Dobbs tonight, for crying out loud. We're going to get her converted right away. You know. I appreciate that. I don't know how many times a day I get asked to run for president. Can you imagine that? Ha! Yeah. I don't know if you're applauding the question or the answer that I give every time, which is, saying goes, is not only no, but hell no. But on the question of being a president, now I don't know about you, I'm getting pretty excited because we've got so many people who want to be president of the United States. Forgive me if I'm a little backward about this. To me, to be president of the United States, now this is just the way I was raised, and sometimes a man or woman in this country is raised, you can be a little provincial. I was born in a little town, raised in another little town, then went off to the big bad world on the East Coast to get an education. And did I get an education? But I had the idea growing up that to be president of the United States was a very special honor, that it required very special credentials, that it required great capacity, great character, a man or woman of some serious achievement and accomplishment. And as I look at the field of candidates out there today, it drives me to this question that I just have to ask you. How many of you are just riotously, exuberantly excited at the prospect of one of these people becoming president of the United States in 2008? How many of you are just revved up about it?
Ron Paul.
Can we see those hands one more time? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 people out of this crowd, folks. 10 people. Think about it. Woof. Don't you think we ought to be able to do maybe half of us get kind of excited? I don't know about you. I admire the 10 of you. Who are excited because, frankly, you have discovered something that is hidden from me, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. And I mean no offense to those folks, but when I talked about what was once the character and the caliber of person who sought that office, I'm having a hard time seeing that. You've got one fellow running who 2.5 years ago wasn't even in national office. You got two folks, be 70 some odd years old if they stepped into the office and if they won. Can somebody tell me just one of the most amazing achievements of any one of these candidates? Now I'm exempting Fred Thompson because he has done a marvelous job in law enforcement. You got to admire that. And Well, I think you got to take seriously Rudy Giuliani. He was a very good mayor. You don't often see mayors become presidents of the United States, but it's an interesting kind of career ladder. And Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. Go, girl. Did you see all the stories about those guys ganging up on her? 6 against 1. Son of a guns. Well, she's kicking their... She's the front runner, and they're supposed to go after her. But it's sort of interesting that every time Hillary gets into a bit of a picadillo, somebody's got a conspiracy either brewing or in action. It ain't fair. That's a shame, because she's probably, if not the brightest, one of the brightest candidates running. But we don't have time in this country for victims right now in our leadership. We've got too many of them in our society. We've got a society in which the greatest institution, the great equalizer, public education, is being destroyed. It's being destroyed by partisanship. It's being destroyed by liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats. It's being destroyed by liberals who want to start magnet schools and charter schools, and being destroyed by conservatives who want vouchers. It's also being destroyed by something called No Child Left Behind. 10 years to get it fixed, and that's a bipartisan program. Let me give you just one word of counsel, if I may. Anytime you hear bipartisan in this day and age, reach for your wallet and hide from the consequences. Because if these two parties agree on something, I can almost take it to the bank that it's going to be bad for America. And I can't think of an exception. Can you? These two parties, dominated as they both are, folks, by corporate America, by large donors, are, in point of fact, opposite wings of the same bird. That's all they are. Democrats and Republicans are beholden to corporate America for their campaign contributions, for their lobbying money. How much money is being spent in Washington, D.C. to influence our legislators, our Congress, our House, our Senate, our President, the executive branch? Over $2 billion a year. Is it any wonder that the middle class, working men and women in this country and their families have all but no representation in Washington, D.C.? There are no accidents. It is the course of our fate, because we have permitted this Congress, instead of building a database, building a knowledge base, instead of understanding what is happening in healthcare or public education or in foreign policy, to rely on the think tanks that are funded by corporate America, by special interests, by socio-ethnocentric interests, instead of the staff that is responsible for the research and for the knowledge. You know, one of the other great things, we've been doing a lot of reporting on my broadcast on the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Yes, we have one. We have one that has noticed retroactively that a lot of the things that are being made in China and exported to this country are contaminated with lead. Little things like Halloween teeth. They made that discovery Halloween morning. A lot of people have done their Halloween shopping. Toys of all kinds. Baby cribs. I mean, it goes on and on. We're talking about literally millions of products. And there has been no action taken. Not a single toy brand in this country held accountable. And by the way, the Bush administration, and the previous administration as well, by the way, the Clinton administration, over the course of those two administrations, has cut the budget by half, reduced the size of the staff. Do you know how many people are assigned to the Consumer Product Safety Commission to inspect toys being brought into this country by the millions, by the giant container loads? They're backing up at our docks on the West Coast. Do you know how many people they have to inspect that? There you go. One. Now that inspector, if I've ever heard of job security, now I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but he or she has it. They also have another little problem. I don't want to think about the overtime that they're going to have to go through. Can you imagine that we've gotten to this point? I mean, it's absurd. And then we have investigations by Congress. Congress, by the way, we've got nearly 4,000 Americans killed in Iraq, nearly 30,000 wounded, nearly 13,000 of them seriously. We have troops in Afghanistan. We have troops stationed in 40 countries around the world fighting radical Islamist terrorism. This administration doesn't want to say it, and neither does the Democratic Party or leadership in Congress. This is not a war on terror. It's a war on radical Islamists. They haven't even got the guts and the integrity to tell you straightforwardly who the enemy is against which we've been fighting for more than 6 years. Your Congress has decided to investigate whether or not more than 90 years ago the Turks committed genocide against the Armenians. Let me tell you, the Turks committed genocide against the Armenians. It's a historical fact. We know that. But as bad as that, as an example of the leadership of Nancy Pelosi and Senator Harry Reid and Senate Majority Leader, the United States government, the Bush administration, declared that that shouldn't be taken up by Congress, not because it's a simple waste of time, not because it doesn't add to a dialogue and a national discussion on the quality of our political policy and our foreign policy and our military policy, but because we might offend the Turkish government. That is appalling. So where does one turn in Washington, D.C.? To a White House that cannot lead? To a Congress that cannot lead? I hope I'm wrong when I say they cannot lead. I hope it is that they have chosen not to lead for some reason that is a state secret so dear and so sensitive that none of us are permitted to begin to even possibly guess at it. But that is the reality. So if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, I would urge you to start thinking about being an independent. I've been calling now for 2 years for people to register as independents. To do so because, and I will tell you, I was a lifelong Republican. But to do so because to be taken for granted by either one of these political parties is an insult to you. It's an insult to our intelligence, to our national foundation, the national issues that is at the core of our being, because both political parties seem, frankly, hell-bent on destroying them. We need to send a message loud and clear to Washington, D.C., to the branding mechanisms that call themselves political parties, to the fundraising organizations that call themselves political parties, that the American voter will no longer be taken for granted. That you're not going to, in outrage, sit down and write a check because the Republicans or the Democrats suddenly they've sent out an email blast or a direct mail flyer, or they've got someone spewing nonsense on national television screaming gun control, abortion, gay marriage. Oh, God, gay marriage. Who's the last president who weighed in and changed the direction of national policy on any one of those so-called wedge issues? Oh, It hasn't happened. It won't happen, ladies and gentlemen. Those are not the issues that we have to confront. Those are not the issues we have to resolve. Gay marriage. Think about this. Some idiot. Oops. I promised my wife I wouldn't use the word idiot. I've got to apologize again. Some senator decided that we needed a constitutional ban on gay marriage. Can you imagine how proud we'd all be if we could go hold up the Constitution of the United States and look down to the amendment banning gay marriage? I'm an American, and it says here we're banning gay marriage. I mean, what are people thinking about? First of all, let's start just empirically. What is the biology? What is the physics? You know, when I'm told that heterosexual marriage is threatened by homosexual marriage, I can't begin to fathom the physics of that. If there's anybody here who can explain that to me, I'd like to hear it. I don't get it. And if there's somebody who can explain to me why we should just simply dismiss the Second Amendment, because underlying those bills, that Bill of Rights, there are only two basic issues. We're a very simple country. We're simple people. We got a lot of lawyers. As I look down here at Glenn Reed from King and Spalding, and with whom I had a wonderful discussion, he and his lovely wife. I got to say, it's as simple as it could be. This is a nation founded on two values: individual liberty and equality. Now, you all can complicate that any way you want to, but it's really that straightforward. We must jealously assert our own rights and jealously, zealously demand that the rights of others be as respected and protected as our own. We don't need group politics in this country. We don't need identity politics in this country. We don't need the politics of special interests. We need the politics of our founding fathers, who feared factionalism, who feared that we would devolve into contesting and competing groups that would overwhelm those values. And that individual liberty that we should so jealously and zealously protect, we should also look to the issue of equality. Equality of opportunity. As far as I'm concerned, that equality of opportunity in two spheres, if we can assure that for one another, we will fulfill the promise of our forebears. The equality of educational opportunity, the equality of economic opportunity. If we can deliver on those promises for one another and put aside the partisanship and disregard the fools who fill the airwaves with all of the ideological nonsense, if we can demand that as the centerpiece of our present and our future, we have, in my judgment at least, very good prospects for assuring that this country will deliver for the next generation of Americans. But if we accept again in 2008 what we witnessed in 2004, we are putting our very nation in jeopardy. Think about what we did in 2004 without comment. I don't know how many people I've heard say, you know, Lou, it's a shame about 2000. We had that contest between Al Gore and George W. Bush, and Bush stole the election, the Supreme Court did. Folks, that isn't the real issue. The real issue is, in 1988, we elected a Bush. In 1992, we elected a Clinton. In 2000, another Bush. And by the way, that year we had a fellow from Harvard running against a fellow from Yale. One fellow, a son of privilege, the other fellow, a son of privilege. 300 million people, the most diverse nation on the face of the earth, and this is what we produced. And you want to talk to me about what the Supreme Court did or the fact that somebody got robbed in Florida? What in the world is wrong with the way Americans are thinking? That is the issue. Why in the world are we not behaving as the diverse nation we are? Why is our great strength, which is our diversity, not being reflected in our national politics? And the reason is corporate America, socio-ethnocentric interest groups, special interest groups, and factionalism at its worst are dominating our political lives. And, ladies and gentlemen, you and I are permitting it. But we can be proud of 2004 because that diversity produced, a Democrat and a Republican, one from Yale, the other from Yale, one a member of Skull and Bones, the other guy was also from Skull and Bones. Anybody here from Skull and Bones? Shh, don't tell. And both sons of privilege. At no time in our history have so few made so much money. And since we began keeping records of such things, the top 1% of the population in this country in terms of income are taking down a greater share of the national income than at any time since the Depression. And working men and women, wages and salaries constitute the lowest share of national income since World War II. For the first time in our history, only 1 in 3 people surveyed believe that their children will have better lives than they. The book is about being an independent. The book is about being self-reliant, exercising independent judgment, independent thinking, and setting aside the orthodoxies that are crowding out reason, crowding out clear thinking, and good hearts. It's going to take some great courage to push aside the partisanship and the partisans. But I'll give you some good news. Independents are registering at a faster rate than either Democrats or Republicans. More Americans today in all the surveys that are being taken are identifying themselves as independents rather than Democrats or Republicans. And in that independence is the promise of fulfilling a destiny that was dreamed of 200 years ago and for which my generation owes a great apology for its failure to deliver. Hopefully, we can do better by acting much sooner. We've got just about a year. The publication of the book, by the way, is on November 6th, Tuesday. Purely a coincidence, that just works out to be 1 year from Election Day 2008. Please choose wisely, and for God's sake, be independent. Thank you very much. I'll be delighted to take whatever questions you've got, if you've got any. You're a little too eager. Uh-oh.
With your books that have come out, with what you've said
Right.
the show, last year, as everybody may remember, we had a day without a Mexican.
We did?
Having the podium.
My book was called...
With your books going on, the War Against the Middle Class.
Yes.
Bringing that to mind, and then last year bringing to mind the day without the middle class. Your podium, and with what you just said, saying that you would like something done, and so am I, and I have registered as an independent.
Good man.
I would ask you, please, on your website, to put an attachment so that show the people that are running for office.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
I would love to do it, but I don't have the podium. Or
That
the
is a
knowledge.
brilliant darn idea.
A day without the middle class. Lou Dobbs voted. That's a sign for it.
Partner?
I would make it for you if I had a podium.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know, all it takes in this country, you know, the great thing about this country is we're still a bunch of folks who we can have some ideas and we can make some things happen. What drives me crazy are to hear my fellow Americans tell me in various quarters, whether it's some working people in manufacturing, whether it's some dock workers, whether it's, I was just talking to a man, I think I just saw him here, who's a carpenter. Yes, sir. You know, the great thing about this country, and I'm not saying it's easy, but one man, one woman can still make a difference. And a whole bunch of us can turn this thing around. But you got to believe that. You know what drives me crazy? I've never once, in the issue of illegal immigration, I've never once called for the deportation of a single illegal alien. You know that? Never. And you know how many people have said to me that we couldn't deport 12 to 20 million illegal aliens? Now, I get angry at that. Not because I want to deport them, but because somebody is telling the American people what we can't do. I'm sick and tired of the American people being told what we can't do. We need to start electing leaders who tell us what we can do, what we should do, and move ahead. There is in this country a sense of ennui that I find, first of all, I find it repelling. I get almost nauseous to think of what has been accomplished by the generations before us, and think what this generation has accomplished. I have to tell you, name the last great big piece of infrastructure that was constructed in this country. The last great big public investment in our future. The last time we had a leader stand up and say, we're going to capture the minds of our young people, and we're going to commit ourselves to a better education in mathematics and natural sciences, and we're going to assure prosperity. We've got idiots running around.
That's synonymous with sentiment.
Okay, thank you. I'll tell my wife we worked that out. We've got folks running around this country talking about, well, we can't have Social Security because, you know, we just got 77 million baby boomers. You know, I got a little surprise for everybody here. I see there are a few baby boomers here. Most of the baby boomers are going to be working for quite a few years yet, okay? The other part is the baby boomers are the best educated segment of our society. That's what's really frightening. And that educational level declines as you go through each succeeding generation to us old folks, okay? The productivity that would be absent without us. We're not the ones who are going to be depending on Social Security, believe it or not. We are going to be the ones who are going to have to shore up this country. And you know what? It's only fair. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's my generation that has failed those who have not had higher levels of education than us. Because we haven't invested in our own youth, in our own sons and daughters. And I don't mean individually. Some of us, obviously, we've done our best. But we haven't done our best for everybody. We've got half of the Hispanics, nearly half of the Hispanic students in this country dropping out of high school. Nearly half of the black students in this country are dropping out of high school. And we walk down to the Stop and Shop, the A&P, the Safeway, the Kroger's, whatever it may be, pick up our groceries and go home like nothing's going on. We're wasting an entire generation. And which of our public officials, which of our elected officials is talking about it? You've got senators and congressmen and a president talking about no child left behind. So we got another 6 years, another 6 million kids who will not have the education they deserve. Now, folks, I'm a poor kid. Inside this old guy is the poor kid I was born and raised. And without public education, I wouldn't have had any kind of opportunity. If there weren't public school teachers who cared enough, they didn't care whether I was in blue jeans and a T-shirt, or little Lord Fauntleroy. They just wanted to inspire their students. And thank God, we owe that same responsibility to every kid in this country. And it's not a talking point. It's not a discussion between Republicans and Democrats. It has to be a national commitment, and it has to be a commitment that none of us tolerates being abandoned. If you will, where is Arlene Foreman? See that lady back there? Could I trouble you? She's got her hand waving. She's a little lady. She's my assistant. Would you give her your name? And we're going to do exactly what you suggested. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dobbs, I've always felt that our forefathers, at least the first 100 years of our country, were in public service because it was expected of those to whom much is given, much is expected, and they were in it for public service for their country. Mm-hmm. Whereas the last 50 years, it seems as if people running for office are in it for their own power and ego. Where did we go off track?
Well, I wish that were your construction. I like your construction of history. The truth is, Americans, we haven't been a perfect people, and I don't in any way mean to suggest that when I talk about the promise of our founders. We had to fight a war to make sure that everybody in this country had rights of citizenship. Well, everybody except women. Then we waited another little while. And I won't tell you what my wife and I say about that. I kid my wife about that women's suffrage thing a lot. And she's decided to let me live, even though I make those jokes. Think about it. I mean, for us not to have given women the right to vote, for all citizens not to have had the right to vote and have equal rights, it took us 150 years. We had some pretty base and mean people in public office. We also had some wonderful geniuses in office. I'm not suggesting to you that America, we could argue that you and I are better people in many ways than the folks who preceded us in some ways, I guess. But we don't have the excuses they did. There is no excuse for us to be mean, for us to be base, for us to be callow, and lacking in any commitment to one another. We live in the greatest consumer society on the face of the earth. We have more opportunity to read. We're better. We have 500 channels. We have an internet. But what have we committed to that? Well, the internet is made up of 70% email and pornography. I won't ask anybody in here which part you're going to give up first. But we have to think who we are and who we want to be and who we're becoming. And when I talk about our founders, I'm not talking about it from a nostalgic point of view. I'm talking about it from the point of view of one who, like everybody I think in this room, understands what the promise is. Why can't we achieve the promise that was imagined by those great leaders of 200 years ago? You're right in general. Our public servants, we're servants of the public. And people forget too often in this country that we're not just a bunch of rum-dums sitting here as consumers in a consumer society, units of labor. America is, first of all, not a free market. It is not, first of all, some sort of a consumer network. America is first and foremost a nation. And Americans are first and foremost not consumers or savers or workers, units of labor. We're citizens. When's the last time you heard a corporate leader, corporate CEOs speak of corporate responsibility, corporate citizenship? For me, it's been a very long time. We cannot turn to our corporate CEOs for leadership because they've abdicated to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, to the Business Roundtable, and to their lobbyists in Washington. They're afraid to speak for the nation because they want to claim they're an international business. And I say to every one of them, if you want to be an international business without corporate responsibility and citizenship in this country, then please go away. We have to make a decision. Are we going to be a nation, or are we going to be a market? Are we going to be citizens, or are we going to be consumers? And are we going to allow economics to dominate our political and social lives? And if we do, with that decision, all is lost. Be independent. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dobbs, thanks for the opportunity. My name is Mary McCarthy, and I want to thank you for making this Rebel Without a Clue into an activist. I appreciate it. I think it's a shame that if anybody watches you on a daily basis, for them not to make one phone call, a fax, or an email to their representative, they should be ashamed of themselves.
No.
My question to you is, I watched, I think it was Thursday or Friday, a program where Ed Rollins was asked, I think by you, if what you thought independents would be, voting for, who they,
Right.
thought they'd be voting for, and he said Barack Obama, which surprised me, because I personally, he's on your panel a lot, and I can't imagine he was clueless in that. And I like this guy, but when he was for the DREAM Act, I think a co-sponsor of the DREAM Act, Obama was.
He was an original sponsor.
For comprehensive immigration.
Well, if you're about to ask me to explain Ed Rollins,
Well, no.
you know what?
I like him, but I was shocked at that.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, frankly, I was surprised too.
yeah.
But when you ask a person their opinion, they give it. There's not much you can do but say, "Thank you."
Your viewers are,
We had a lot of reaction to that, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure what Ed was, and I didn't have a chance after the broadcast to talk to him. But, it's one man's opinion. And he's a knowledgeable and one of the smartest political analysts and strategists in the country. Knowing Ed, I think probably there's a little part of him trying to just stir things up a little bit. If an independent is going to vote, for one of these candidates right now, they're not being independent enough, in my opinion. I'd just like to see, what I would love to see? Well, you didn't ask me the question, so I'll just shut up.
Where is he coming from? I'm shocked. How clueless can you be? He's a Republican strategist, I believe.
Right.
And,
Well, don't.
how many people how clueless they really are? I mean, he's on your show and doesn't get it. That just shocks me.
I'm going to tell Ed that he's got a no vote out there. Thank you. I'm not going to explain Republicans. I'm not going to explain Democrats. I have the greatest respect for Ed. He's an old friend, and he's a brilliant, I truly mean this, a brilliant analyst and strategist, as is Hank Scheinkopf on the Democratic side. Absolutely brilliant. Do I agree with them? They're there because I don't agree with them, and they're there to present a point of view. And I kind of like that. And if it gets us all kind of thinking and chewing on things, that's a net positive. But I appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Mr. Dobbs. My husband and I regularly watch your program.
Thank you.
For being here today. And I have worked for one of the largest lobbyists in D.C., and I witnessed firsthand the incredible power of corporate money.
Right.
And the way that there was simply no ethics attached to people's actions once they left power, they left the cabinet posts, and simply go to work for big companies and things. So I have been watching the politics, and I'm an independent voter, and I simply was very, very disillusioned and very unhappy with politics for
Sure.
a long time. And then recently I discovered that there is a politician named Ron Paul who does support the Constitution and freedom
Right.
and the basics of government. And he's also a congressman who's never voted for raising taxes. So I was wondering what you think about Mr. Paul and his position
Right.
in politics. And as a political
Well,
president.
the question was, did everybody hear the question? Basically, I apologize. She was asking basically my view on Ron Paul, who is running on the Republican for the Republican nomination. He's a libertarian. He's a good and I think honest man, which, by the way, sets him apart from a very large number of folks in Washington, D.C. But I'm not prepared to either endorse or I couldn't endorse or support him, and it's because of a broader range of issues. And I would not, and by the way, I would say that of every candidate. I'm just not about to get into that. What I'm going to hope for, the man is 72 years of age. He may be, and he's extremely healthy and able and vigorous, 72. I wouldn't argue that. I have a lot of trouble with folks who don't see a role for government. I see a strong role for government. I believe that government should be protecting the public, should be strong in consumer product safety, should be regulating our marketplaces far more vigorously than they are. I believe, I'm like anyone else. I wish the taxes were, 2% tax sounds great to me. But at the same time, I'm one of the people who's most fortunate in this country, and I don't think there's any excuse in the world for me not to be carrying a heavier burden, and responsibility financially for supporting the government, nor a lot of people who are making more money than others. I also believe that, and I might as well put this straight out there, that if we've got just about 1.4 million people in uniform in this country, in all services, serving the military. We had 1.5 million people in uniform in the summer before Pearl Harbor, when we were a nation of just over 100 million people. The threats today, in my judgment, could arguably, I think reasonably be argued, are as severe. I don't believe that America was ever supposed to be a country where a volunteer military took on the burden of citizenship for all its people. I think each of us has a responsibility for military service, for national service, community service that should be shared fully and equally across the board. I don't think there is one of us who has a God-given right not to serve his or her country. And I'm going to tell you, any one of these candidates who had the guts to say that out loud probably would lose 3/4 of the vote, because people simply will not awaken to our responsibilities. But what we're doing to our men and women in uniform right now is disgusting, it is criminal, and we ought to be ashamed. We have men and women with 3 tours of duty in Iraq, some with 4. We have the lowest recruiting level for the United States Army. And understandably so, because it took us 2 years to up-armor Humvees to protect young men in those Humvees. We had won World War II at this point in the conflict, and we couldn't even up-armor a Humvee. And we have no discussion, no debate about any of this on the national political stage. Why? We need to ask ourselves that. We're not hearing it from Ron Paul. We're not hearing it from Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Fred Thompson, Mitt Romney.
Well, Ron Paul has said that.
Well, no, ma'am. He wants us out, period. I understand. That really isn't an answer, because the fact is that radical Islamists mean to destroy us, and to simply walk away is not an answer. And let me tell you, whatever else, and no one is more critical of this president and his administration, the conduct of this war, than I am. But I am also just as critical of Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, who have put forward the appearance that they would withdraw troops when they both know better that they would not, and that our troops will be required in Iraq and the Middle East for some time to come. It's a time for honesty. It's a time for straightforward discussion, not a time for partisan spin, deflection, posturing, parsing. For God's sake, the question to Senator Clinton the other day on driver's licenses for illegal aliens. How many of you saw her answer to that question? Is there anyone in this room who doubts that Bill Clinton and the way he parsed the word is, if those two, Senator Clinton and President Clinton, were not married and put their forms into one of those internet dating services, they would have come back a perfect match. I mean, does anyone doubt that? It was remarkable. I thank you.
Hi, thank you for taking the opportunity to answer our questions.
Surely.
I really enjoy your show a lot.
Well, thank you.
And I just wanted to say something real quick that I thought of while you were answering her question. Rockwell has received more military donations than any other candidate, Republican or Democrat. I just wanted to throw that in there. But I wanted to say, thank you for your courage on your show for bringing up the North American Union.
Right.
And I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but the Union of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And the powers that be want to do this by 2010, and they want to introduce the Amero as new currency. And when I heard about that, that just scared me to death, and it really got me into action politically and everything. And
by the way, they're the ones who are scared now because everyone understands the foundation of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, which is the basic agreement among Mexico, Canada, and the United States to create harmonization, as they put it, in the free flow of commerce. But anyway, your question, ma'am, we've got a lot of folks waiting.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank you for that.
Surely.
And, a lot of the presidential candidates from the National Foreign Relations, which is pushing this, so please do your research and check it out. Thank you.
That was kind of along the lines of my question. I just wondered what the role, if you would want to comment on the role of the Council of Foreign Relations on our selection of presidential candidates and just how powerful.
Yeah. Well, the Council of Foreign Relations is a fine group of folks doing a fine job of something. I have to tell you, we have a situation in this country in which we have a number of organizations, and I would put the Council of Foreign Relations among them, that are feeders into the national public policy discussion. They are funded by corporate America. They are funded by the wealthy and the elites. Whether we talk about the neocons, who are the basis for the adventure into Iraq, whether we talk about neoliberals, who are the ones driving the Treaty of the Sea, the so-called Lost Treaty, which has just come out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which will basically put the United States, subordinate further the United States to the United Nations governance. All of this is part of the thinking of a one world league that's represented by the thinking of the Council of Foreign Relations. It's represented by the neoliberals of the Democratic and Democratic Party, or the neocons of the Republican Party. There is, and what is common among them? The multinationals and corporate America, which is driving for, simply open borders and the end of national sovereignty. And if we're not very careful, they're going to have their way, because most people are oblivious to what is happening. The national media will not focus on it because it's discomforting, and because the national media has already chosen up its sides, as a Harvard study just revealed. Something I think everybody knew, that the biases of the national media are straightforward. They've been there a long time. But that's why it's more critical than ever for you, for all of our fellow citizens, to be looking at what is happening independently, be self-reliant in terms of developing your knowledge and your understanding of what's happening, and demand much of these candidates. Because what we're watching is an effort to reshape a world in an image that none of us ever envisioned. Yes, sir.
Mr. Dobbs, we are out of time, but if you want to give maybe just these two.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobbs. And thank you for your presentation,
Thank you.
for your statement of your convictions. stated that I believe that the 1% of our population has greater wealth today than at any time during or since the Depression. What do you see needs to be, or what do you believe needs to happen
Right.
to put that go back in balance
Sure.
or to achieve a proper position?
A number of things. One, I was actually referring to income, that is wages and compensation as the national income rather than wealth. But the top 1% have seen their incomes rise over the last 2 years by over 20%, while the half of the nation has seen its income, half of the workforce has seen its income either stagnate or decline. I am a great believer in free enterprise democracy. I'm a capitalist. I just don't believe in unfettered capitalism. I don't believe in rampant greed, and I don't believe in capitalism without responsibility, which is the environment in which we are now living. When you ask what is the solution, the first, it's got to be broad-based. One, we have to stop the outsourcing of American jobs to overseas markets. We have to stop the offshoring of those jobs. We have to commit to educating our young people. And we have to understand clearly that there is nothing more expensive than free trade. We have opened a $12 trillion economy to the world without seeking reciprocity, mutuality. And that's madness. As a result, wages in this country have been basically stagnant for the past 30 years. Think about that. And one wage earner 35 years ago was supporting a family of 4 that now requires 2 wage earners. What is the sociological impact? Tremendous. What is the cost? I think that we all understand what the cost is. But the idea that I would punish the wealthy, I have no interest in punishing the wealthy. I do believe that taxes should be progressive. I do believe the wealthy should pay a higher percentage of their income to the federal government and to the state government. And I believe we could do so at a very reasonable rate that's far more attractive than anything, for example, in Europe, and still achieve a resilient and vibrant economy that still drives innovation and provides proper reward. But we have to put an emphasis on earning a living wage in this country. And we have to, if we cannot have a countervailing influence in terms of unions, we've got to have it at least in the decency and the conscience of the business leaders of this country, whose business practices today are shameless. We just watched one man who lost in one quarter, the company had to write down $8 billion. The company wrote him a check for well, not literally, but wrote him a check, might as well have written him a check, for $165 million to leave. We have ball players making $25 million a year. We have teachers making $25,000 a year. Don't talk to me about economics. That's just plain madness. And we've got to come to grips with it. Only 1 in 10 teachers in this country has a degree in math or natural sciences in which they're teaching a class. 1 in 10. Most school teachers leave public education after half of them are gone after 5 years. We've got to do a lot better. Yes, ma'am. And then I'll get you, sir. And then we're.
George Carlin said that we should give our Constitution to these other countries now because we're not using ours anymore.
Well, I tell you what. There's an old saying. There's some things worth living for. There's some things worth dying for. That Constitution's worth dying for.
countries now have females as president, and we have more females than males in this country. And I heard Soledad O'Brien say that 6 months ago, but is America ready for a woman president? I sent her a little note, and I said, well, if we had 200 years of female presidents, how would you feel about saying, how would you feel about saying, are we ready for a male? And I would say, heck no. American women do not have a whole lot of representation. I mean, look, take 5'2" Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, she is the only one who really represents women on the Supreme Court.
Don't forget Sandra Day O'Connor, who did a heck of a job.
A heck of a job, and I wish she was still there.
Well, I do too, but everybody's got to do what they got to do. She'd committed, a quarter of her life to the Supreme Court. When you talk about women, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you said she was 5'2", which is correct. May I say something personal that I think sort of sums up my view about women? I've lived with a woman for a very long time who is 5'2". She's 5'3". But the thing that has impressed me about her is she's 5'2", but she has a 6'6" attitude. So I wouldn't worry too much about a woman's height if I were you, based on the women I've known, and particularly my wife. Let me guarantee you, if 5'2", my wife, I always say this, I've got 4 kids, 2 sons, 2 daughters. I've always said this about my daughters. I may live to regret this, neither is married. But I worry less about them than I do about, man, I hope they run into guys strong enough to handle them. Because they are very serious young ladies who mean business. And I wouldn't worry too much about that woman-man thing. That'll take care of itself. Half the women in law school, or half the students in law school now, half of medical school is made up of women. We've got a bunch of folks worrying about 1965 in this country. There are a bunch of folks who think, we're still fighting civil rights. I'm not. If there's any man, woman, or child who thinks that every American doesn't have equal rights, or that any American can be denied a right, I think they're lower than a snake's belly, because that's no part of America. If there's any man or woman who thinks that a woman doesn't have the same rights, what are we talking about here? This is the United States. We have, as I said at the outset, we have to aggressively, firmly, and with happy and warm hearts insist that each of us enjoy the same rights, the same opportunities. The rest will resolve itself. I frankly could care less whether it's a man or a woman in the White House. Let me ask something. Anybody here care whether it's a man or a woman? I hope it's just some. Please give me a leader. Please. The national elites, man, create this fiction. We had a professor at NYU who had a noose. She's black. Had a noose drawn, anyway, outside her classroom. That was news for 3 days in New York City. Do you know how many black New Yorkers there are? It was tabloid journalism. It was disgusting. And frankly, unworthy of anyone's time. Send the police out, take care of it. Why are we even looking at why are we even talking about such a thing? A nation of 300 million people. Anybody here against racial intermarriage? See, I think we ought to be encouraging it. I'd like to see as many little black, brown, white, Asian, I don't care what. I want everybody. Let's mix it up. But guess what? All you liberals and all you conservatives have held black people in urban America in the same block instead of talking about mobility. Anybody want to say we shouldn't do that? Because we shouldn't. There's got to be a reason for it. I talked to my friend Jesse Jackson. What are we doing here? Where are the black leaders? Well, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton will say it's them. It ain't. You know? And guess what? George Bush and Harry Reid are the white leaders? Give me a break. We've got bright young people who are emerging in this country. But guess where they're emerging? The national media finds it easier to call Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson or Harry Reid. Or we put 300 reporters in the White House press briefing room. Why? Why does the President of the United States have to talk every day? Shut up! Because it's easy. And we in the national media have a responsibility. We should be going into the cities and the communities and finding and discovering. For us, it would be discovery. In those communities, it would just simply be revealing the obvious. Young men and women of every race, every ethnicity, from every economic background to represent this nation. But we don't. We are stagnant. And, you know, you ask about, and I'm not, and under no circumstances am I being sexist, or, no, ageist. I would be ageist. The fact that Ron Paul and Senator John McCain are men in their 70s, or would be if they were elected, would be in their 70s, you know, that isn't what bothers me. What bothers me is, where is the next generation of leadership? And why won't they step forward? And why can't we in the national media find them? That's what bothers me.
My final remark is some of us were visiting earlier before we came in, and I was just a little bit disappointed. I thought, well, here we are in our kitchens, and go Luke, get him Luke. And we had a little bit of time to get you in there tonight. You must have been tired from a busy week. We're so glad you're here and that you can use this as your relaxing time.
I'm not sure I understood what you meant.
I'll explain it to you later.
You got a deal. Now, you said that the way my wife says it. And usually it takes her a while to explain it to me. I look forward to the explanation. And I apologize for my slow comprehension. Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. Dobbs. My name is Hal David.
Yes.
I went in the military after Federal level. I went to basic training in the 13.
Sir, if you could speak into the microphone, I don't think all of us can hear.
Sorry. I went in the military in November of 01, and I got out a little early because of the point changing program. But I work construction now.
Thank you. Hello?
I work construction now, and I work a lot with illegal aliens. They're all over the place.
Right.
So I wondered, you know, who was it I was fighting for? And I can listen to NPR, and they say there's no interrogation happening. It's real bad. Sometimes they'll offer Subway or something of that nature. I understand we lease the base from Cuba. It's still Cuban soil. How can Subway operate there legally if the embargo's on?
Right.
So I wondered if anybody had seen Liberty Dollar. It's a private currency started by someone who cares about economics. It's got an independent warehouse and third-party inspections. It's backed by silver and gold. So
Well, I'm not familiar with the Liberty Dollar. It does distress me, and I'm sure it distresses everybody in this room to hear you even hint that there's any doubt about who you were fighting for and what you were doing in that uniform. And we appreciate, I think I can say that safely for everyone in this room, your service. The fact that there are illegal aliens in this country doesn't change who you were serving, doesn't change the honor of your service, and in point of fact is immaterial, because it's a failure of civilian leadership, not military leadership. It's a failure of two parties to treat with respect sovereign borders and ports, borders that more than 6 years after September 11th remain wide open. Think about that. With more private security contractors in Iraq than we have troops, our borders remain wide open. Yet our President and our Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security says we are in a war against terror. 95% of the cargo that enters this country through our ports is completely uninspected. Think about that. We're spending $200 billion a year on a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, but aren't inspecting cargo in our ports and not securing our borders. Hard to figure, isn't it? Hard to figure why none of these candidates wants to discuss it. Hard to figure why none of these candidates, whether they're Republican or Democrat, want to contend with the issue. I am anti-illegal immigration. I'm pro-immigration. And we bring into this country, you wouldn't know this from the national media, would you? We bring into the United States of America, already the most racially, ethnically, religiously diverse nation on the face of the earth. There's no close second. We bring in more than 2 million people legally into this country every year. More than 2 million people. And you have socio-ethnocentric activists saying to Americans that we're nativist, that we're racist, that we're xenophobic, because we want to control our borders and control our ports and control immigration. And the national media perpetuates the lie when it can so easily be dispensed with the facts. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And the reason is, again, corporate America and special interests are dominating not only our political system, our legislative system, our electoral system, but also the media. And until we break away from this orthodoxy and start looking at the facts and judging critically and independently what is happening to this country, we're in for great, great turmoil. And we need to begin changing that direction. So I don't know anything about the Liberty Dollar. I'll figure it out, and I will get researched as fast as a fellow of my age and condition can. And I'll have a thought on it, and I'll even put it on the air and see where we go from there. But again, thank you. I want to thank all of you. Appreciate you taking time. Appreciate it.